Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Easy Learn. And today's topic is algebra, within which we're going to be doing quadratic equations. Now, we've already discussed that quadratic equations can be solved using three methods, and that is zero factor property, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. I've already taught how to solve quadratics using zero factor and completing the square in my previous videos. You can check out the links in the description below. And for today's lesson, we're going to be doing the quadratic formula. Now, in order to begin with a quadratic equation, one thing you need to know is that a quadratic equation has a specific general format that looks something like this: ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, x squared is basically the term that helps you understand that it is a quadratic equation. If it was just x, that would be a linear equation, not a quadratic. If it was a x cubed, x to the power of 3, that would tell you that it's a polynomial or whatever, a trinomial equation. But this one is a quadratic because it has an x squared. And whenever you have a quadratic equation, you are supposed to end up, most of the times, you're supposed to end up in two answers of x. X is supposed to be something, probably a positive and a negative answer. Or sometimes it's the same sign, positives, negatives and negatives. That really depends on the question you have. But the general form looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, c are any random values that are given to you. But the x squared and x, that part stays constant. Now, if you want to solve the quadratic equation using the quadratic formula, so obviously, as the name suggests, there is a specific formula for that, and that is x is equal to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. Now, in place of your B and A and C, you have to replace with the numbers, whatever numbers are given to you in the question. But in the end, the answer that you get is for the X. And you will end up in a positive, most of the times positive, and a negative answer because, as you can see, there is a minus B plus minus. A plus minus, I'm going to explain later what it means. But because we have a plus and a minus, that's the reason we end up in two answers. Now, let's look at an example. For example, x squared plus 2x minus 3, and the general format was ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, the very first thing that you have to figure out is what's your A, what's your B, and what's your C. Now, obviously, A x squared means there has to be a number attached with the x squared, so that is your A. Now, in this particular situation, you don't have any number attached. So, whenever you don't have a number attached, it just means that there's an invisible 1 here, which means that my A is equal to 1. Now my b is this one, bx, so b is 2. I won't say my b is equal to 2x because x is already there in the general format. The b is supposed to be a, b, c, all of them are supposed to be numbers, not variables. So b is equal to 2. As you can see, 2x, bx, the same. So b is equal to 2, and my c is equal to negative 3. Make sure you don't forget the negative sign. So c here, standing alone, the number that does not have a variable, that is my c, and that is negative 3 in this particular case. Now, if I tell you that find out the values of x using the quadratic formula, what's the formula again? It's x equals minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, how does plus and minus come into action? Now we're going to see once we start solving. Now, to begin with, we have to, let's just write x is equal to minus b. Now, minus b, now in this situation, we have different numbers here. We have our a and b and c. So I'm going to take my b as 2. So minus b means I'm going to take minus 2 in place of my b. Let's keep the plus and minus just the way it is right now. And then square root of b squared, which means I have a 2 there. So 2 squared minus 4. 4 is something that's already there in the formula, so that stays constant. So minus 4 times the a, which is 1, times the c, which is negative 3 in our case. So 4 times 1 times negative 3 divided by 2a, which means 2 times a, which is 1. So I write 1 here. Now I have minus 2, let it be the way it is, plus or minus square root of 2 squared. 2 squared, 2 times 2 is 4. And then you gotta multiply. So 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. A negative multiplied by a positive is negative. then a negative multiplied by a negative, so it has to be a positive answer. So 2 squared is 4, and 4 times 1 times 3 is positive 12. So 4 plus 12 over, again, 2 times 1 is just 2. Now if I try and simplify, 4 plus 12, so minus 2 plus or minus square root of 4 plus 12, which is 16 over 2. Now here's what this plus and minus is going to open up now. Now the thing is that whenever you take square roots, when we were young, we didn't really care. Square root of 4 was just 2 for us, and square root of 16 would just be 4 for us. But obviously, if you are using the quadratic formula, I think you are smart enough and in your higher levels enough to understand that a square root answer can never just be positive. A square root gives us a positive and a negative answer all the time. Even if it's not a quadratic formula, it's just generally, if I tell you what is the square root of 9, you will not say it's just 3. You're supposed to say it's a positive 3 or a negative 3. That's the rule. That's a general rule when you grow up, that square roots come with a positive and a negative sign. That is the reason the quadratic formula has a positive and a negative sign by default. So now I have minus 2 plus or minus square root of 16. Now square root of 16 means 4. 4 times 4 gives you 16. So now I'm going to split it. This negative and positive sign split apart, and one of the values become, now I know that square root of 16 is 4. So one of them is negative 2 plus 4 over 2, comma, the other one is negative 2 minus 4. Why minus 4? As I already said, because we opened up the square root. Square root of 16 is 4. One has to be with positive, one has to be with negative. That's the rule. That's why the quadratic formula is being used, right? Whenever you have a quadratic equation, it always opens up and gives you two values of x, right? So we have negative 2 plus 4 over 2 and negative 2 negative 4 over 2. Now, negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Again, 2 over 2. And negative 2 and negative 4 is, whenever you have a negative sign and a negative sign, you add up and the sign stays negative. So 2 plus 4 is 6. The sign stays negative, so it's negative 6 over 2. Let me just take the stuff on this side now. So 2 over 2 is 1. And negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. Therefore, my x is equal to either 1 or my x is equal to negative 3. These are my two answers that I have to get out of my quadratic equation and using the quadratic formula. Now, even if I use the other methods, that is the zero factor property or completing the square, I am supposed to end up in x equals 1 and x equals negative 3. But this is another way of solving it. And most of the times when you just have to figure out the values of x, you just jump onto the quadratic formula because it's just easier. And especially when you are allowed to use a calculator, it's just very simple to just go ahead, put it in, and get your final answer. Zero factor property and completing the square kind of wants you to manually work the thing. But quadratic formula, once you remember the quadratic formula, you just put it in your calculator and you get your two answers, simply x equals 1 and x equals negative 3. And one more tip, that whenever you have a quadratic question and which involves further stuff, let's say for example that they give a quadratic equation and they tell you to use that particular answer into solving something, then most of the times we take only the positive answer. Because for example, if they ask you what is the area of the rectangle, you're using this quadratics and everything, in the end you have to figure out one single length of the rectangle in which you have to then tell the area or the perimeter. So obviously you cannot have a length of a rectangle in negative. You always have to use positive. So most of the times the positive answers are used, but for just finding out the values, you have to mention the positive and the negative answer. And how do you get that? When you are squaring up, then before that square root part, we have a plus and a minus. Always the square roots have to be a positive answer and a negative answer. So that's pretty much it. Just try and memorize the formula of this quadratic formula: minus b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And then you can just figure out your ABCs. And then once you have those, you just put it in and you get your final answers. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching Easy Learn, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. If you have any questions, any confusions, you can drop them down in the comment section below. Thank you so much.